Imagine standing in the middle of a frozen battlefield in eastern France during the final months of World War II. Snow covers the ground, thick smoke drifts across the trees, and the distant rumble of tank engines grows louder with every passing second. An entire German force is advancing through the open field, supported by armored vehicles and determined to break the American lines before reinforcements can arrive. Most commanders would have ordered a complete retreat, but one young lieutenant chose a different path. He watched as his exhausted men pulled back into the nearby woods, then turned his attention toward a burning American tank destroyer that had been abandoned moments earlier. What happened next would become one of the most extraordinary acts of bravery in military history and would eventually inspire headlines claiming that one man had forced an entire enemy force to surrender. His name was Audie Murphy, and although his story has become legendary, the reality is even more remarkable than the myth. Long before he became America's most decorated soldier, Audie Murphy's life looked nothing like the stories that would later make him famous. He was born on June 20th, 1925, in the small farming community of Kingston, Texas, where survival depended on hard work and every dollar mattered. His family struggled constantly, and with 12 children to feed, there was never enough money to go around. His father drifted in and out of their lives before eventually disappearing for good, leaving Audie's mother to raise the family alone. From an early age, childhood responsibilities were replaced by adult ones. School became a luxury that he could no longer afford, and before long he left the classroom behind to work in the cotton fields for barely enough money to help keep food on the table. Whenever work was unavailable, he grabbed an old hunting rifle and disappeared into the countryside, returning hours later with rabbits or squirrels that would become dinner for the family. Without realizing it, those long days hunting through the forests of Texas were developing the incredible accuracy and patience that would later save countless lives on European battlefields. Life became even harder in 1941 when his mother died from pneumonia, leaving the family completely shattered. Audie took every job he could find, determined to support the rest of the family. But everything changed on December 7th, when news spread across the country that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. Like millions of other Americans, he immediately understood that the United States was now at war, and despite everything happening at home, he felt an overwhelming desire to enlist. To him, joining the Army meant more than serving his country. It also meant earning a steady paycheck that could help his brothers and sisters to survive. There was only one problem. Audie Murphy was 16 years old, barely 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed less than 100 pounds. Recruiters from the Marines, the Navy, and the Army all looked at the skinny teenager and reached the same conclusion. He was simply too young and too small for military service. Most people would have accepted their decision and returned home. Murphy refused to give up. Together with his older sister, he found a way to alter his birth certificate, so it showed him as 1 year older than he really was. Over the following months, he forced himself to gain enough weight to meet the Army's minimum requirements, and in June 1942, only days after turning 17, he walked back into the recruiting office. This time, the answer was different. The Army accepted him, unknowingly welcoming one of the greatest combat soldiers it would ever produce. Basic training quickly revealed both his weaknesses and his strengths. Physically, Murphy struggled more than many of the other recruits. Long marches, exhausting drills, and endless hours of training pushed his small frame to its limits, and during one exercise he collapsed from exhaustion. Some instructors questioned whether he belonged in the infantry at all, believing he might be better suited for a support role away from the front lines. But whenever a rifle was placed in his hands, every doubt disappeared. His marksmanship was exceptional, and his ability to remain calm under pressure impressed both instructors and fellow soldiers. It became increasingly clear that while Murphy lacked size, he possessed something far more valuable on the battlefield: determination, discipline, and an extraordinary willingness to keep moving forward no matter how difficult the situation became. Early in 1943, after completing his training, Murphy boarded a troop transport bound for North Africa. Like thousands of young American soldiers crossing the Atlantic, he had no real understanding of what awaited him. He had never experienced combat, never heard artillery shells exploding nearby, and never watched friends fall beside him. After arriving in North Africa, Murphy joined the battle-hardened 3rd Infantry Division, one of the most experienced formations in the United States Army. Before facing the enemy, however, another challenge awaited him. The division's commanders believed relentless preparation was the only way to keep inexperienced soldiers alive once combat began. Days were filled with exhausting marches beneath the scorching African sun. That preparation would soon face its ultimate test. In July 1943, Allied forces launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, opening a new front against Axis forces in southern Europe. As the landing craft approached the Sicilian coastline before dawn, Murphy stood among dozens of nervous soldiers waiting for the ramp to drop. The thunder of naval guns echoed across the sea, while columns of smoke rose above the beaches ahead. No amount of training could truly prepare a man for his first battle, and Murphy understood that once the doors opened, there would be no turning back. The landing itself was chaotic but successful. American forces quickly pushed inland, encountering scattered pockets of resistance as they advanced through dusty roads, vineyards, and small villages. During one engagement, Murphy spotted 2 Italian officers attempting to escape on horseback across open ground. While others hesitated, he calmly raised his M1 Garand, tracked the moving targets, and fired with the same precision he had developed years earlier while hunting across the Texas countryside. Both officers fell from their horses, and the successful shots immediately caught the attention of his superiors. It was only a small moment in the larger campaign, yet it revealed qualities that would define Murphy throughout the war: patience, composure, and extraordinary accuracy under pressure. As the Sicilian campaign continued, Murphy's confidence grew alongside his experience. Every village captured and every successful patrol slowly transformed the inexperienced teenager into a dependable infantryman. Before the campaign ended, Murphy contracted malaria and was evacuated to a military hospital. For a young soldier eager to prove himself, being removed from the front lines felt almost worse than facing enemy fire. He recovered as quickly as possible, determined to return before the war moved on without him. When Murphy rejoined the 3rd Infantry Division, the Allied advance had already shifted toward mainland Italy. The fighting there proved far more demanding than anything he had experienced in Sicily. German forces had transformed mountains, rivers, and ancient villages into a vast defensive network, forcing Allied troops to fight for every ridge, every bridge, and every ruined farmhouse. For Murphy, Italy became the place where training finally gave way to experience. Patrol after patrol, firefight after firefight, he learned lessons that could never be taught on a rifle range. He became increasingly confident under pressure, developing an ability to read the battlefield, react quickly, and make decisions that protected not only himself, but the soldiers fighting beside him. His exceptional marksmanship remained one of his greatest strengths, but it was his growing composure and leadership that began attracting the attention of officers throughout the division. In August 1944, following the success of the Normandy invasion, Allied commanders launched Operation Dragoon along the southern coast of France. Murphy and the 3rd Infantry Division landed with the assault forces and immediately began advancing north through vineyards, forests, and small French villages. As Murphy's platoon advanced through the countryside, they repeatedly encountered isolated German defensive positions hidden inside farmhouses, vineyards, and wooded terrain. Every abandoned building represented a potential ambush, and every quiet road could suddenly erupt into violence. Combat in southern France demanded patience as much as aggression, forcing infantrymen to clear every position one by one while never knowing what waited beyond the next stone wall. Among the men serving beside Murphy was his close friend, Laddie Tipton. Months of fighting had created a bond that few outside the military could fully understand. They had survived Sicily together, endured the harsh campaign across Italy, and now continued pushing deeper into France. Like countless soldiers during the war, they relied on one another not only for protection, but for the emotional strength needed to endure another day of combat. During one fierce engagement near WWII, German defenders opened devastating fire on Murphy's advancing unit. In the confusion that followed, Tipton was struck and killed. Murphy could do nothing except watch as one of his closest friends became another casualty of a war that seemed to demand endless sacrifice. The loss stayed with him for the rest of his life. Although he rarely spoke publicly about that moment, many historians consider Tipton's death one of the events that permanently changed Murphy's outlook on the war. Rather than allowing grief to overwhelm him, Murphy responded with extraordinary determination. Throughout the remainder of the campaign in southern France, he repeatedly volunteered for dangerous reconnaissance missions, led attacks against heavily defended enemy positions, and demonstrated an exceptional ability to inspire the exhausted soldiers around him. His courage never appeared reckless. Every decision reflected careful observation, rapid thinking, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the men under his command. His actions during the liberation of France earned him the Distinguished Service Cross, one of the United States Army's highest awards for extraordinary heroism. More importantly, they confirmed what many officers already believed. Murphy possessed the rare ability to lead effectively under the most difficult battlefield conditions. Promotions followed naturally, and despite being only 19 years old, he eventually received a battlefield commission as a second lieutenant. It was a remarkable achievement for the young Texan, who, only 2 years earlier, had been rejected by recruiters for being considered too small to serve. By January 1945, the Allied advance into eastern France had begun to slow. Bitter winter weather, exhausted troops, and increasingly desperate German resistance transformed the region into one of the most dangerous fronts in Europe. Near the small village of Holtzwihr, the 3rd Infantry Division occupied a fragile defensive position overlooking open farmland covered in snow. Murphy, now only 19 years old but already a seasoned combat leader, commanded a company that had been worn down by months of relentless fighting. Few of the men could have imagined that within hours they would become the target of one of the largest German counterattacks of the winter campaign. As dawn slowly broke through the freezing fog on January 26th, Murphy spotted movement across the fields. At first it appeared to be scattered infantry, but the full scale of the attack soon became terrifyingly clear. Nearly 200 German soldiers, supported by 6 advancing tanks, were moving directly toward the American position. The enemy possessed overwhelming superiority in both firepower and numbers, while Murphy's company had already suffered heavy casualties during previous engagements. Remaining in place meant certain destruction, yet abandoning the position too early would expose the rest of the battalion to an even greater disaster. Murphy immediately ordered his men to withdraw into the nearby woods where they could establish a stronger defensive line. The decision almost certainly saved their lives, but before they retreated, someone needed to remain behind. American artillery batteries positioned several miles away could only fire accurately if a forward observer continued reporting the enemy's movements by field telephone. Without those corrections, the advancing Germans would quickly overrun the entire sector. Murphy made the decision himself. He ordered every remaining soldier to fall back while he stayed alone to direct the artillery fire, fully aware that it was a mission from which he might never return. As the last members of his company disappeared into the forest, Murphy found himself completely exposed. German machine guns swept the frozen field while artillery shells exploded around the abandoned American positions. Through the smoke, he noticed an M10 tank destroyer from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion that had been struck earlier in the battle. Its crew had already escaped, but the vehicle was engulfed in flames. Black smoke poured from the engine compartment, and the ammunition stored inside could explode at any moment. Most soldiers would have avoided the burning wreck entirely. Murphy saw an opportunity. He sprinted across the open snow toward the burning vehicle. German machine guns immediately shifted their fire onto the lone American soldier racing through the battlefield. Bullets tore into the frozen ground around him, throwing snow into the air with every impact. Yet Murphy never slowed. Reaching the tank destroyer, he climbed onto the burning hull and positioned himself behind its exposed Browning M2.50 caliber machine gun. From that elevated position, standing on a vehicle that could explode at any moment, he opened fire on the advancing German infantry. The effect was immediate. The heavy machine gun devastated enemy formations, attempting to cross the open ground, forcing soldiers to dive for cover while disrupting the coordination of the entire assault. Between long bursts of fire, Murphy calmly picked up the field telephone and continued transmitting artillery corrections with remarkable precision. American shells began falling closer and closer to the advancing Germans, shattering their formations and creating the illusion that a much larger American force still defended the position. Every correction Murphy transmitted bought his company a few more precious moments to reorganize inside the woods. The Germans quickly recognized that the machine gun posed a serious threat and concentrated nearly every available weapon against the burning tank destroyer. Rifle fire, machine guns, mortars, and tank cannon shells converged on Murphy's position. Smoke and flames surrounded him as burning fuel spread across the vehicle beneath his feet. During the exchange, Murphy suffered a painful wound to his leg, yet he refused to abandon the machine gun. Instead, he continued firing controlled bursts while calmly relaying new artillery coordinates, ignoring both his injury and the growing fire beneath him. For nearly an hour, one man remained in open view against an entire attacking force. From the German perspective, the American defense became increasingly difficult to understand. Every attempt to advance was met by accurate machine gun fire and devastating artillery strikes. Unable to determine how many defenders still occupied the position, the assault gradually lost momentum. The carefully coordinated attack that had promised a breakthrough dissolved into confusion as casualties mounted and formations stalled under constant bombardment. What the Germans believed was a determined defensive line was, in reality, a single wounded soldier refusing to surrender. Only after the German advance had finally been halted did Murphy climb down from the burning tank destroyer. Bleeding from his wounded leg, exhausted and nearly overcome by smoke, he rejoined his company inside the forest. Rather than seeking medical treatment, he immediately reorganized his men and launched a counterattack against the now disorganized German force. Inspired by Murphy's extraordinary example, the Americans pushed forward once again, forcing the enemy to abandon the attack and retreat across the frozen battlefield. Against every reasonable expectation, the position had been saved. Military historians continue to study the Battle of Holtzwihr because Murphy's actions defied nearly every accepted principle of infantry combat. One soldier, exposed on top of a burning armored vehicle while directing artillery and operating a heavy machine gun, should not have survived such an engagement. Yet through exceptional judgment, absolute determination, and extraordinary courage, Murphy transformed what should have been a disastrous defeat into one of the most remarkable defensive actions of the Second World War. His stand did not merely delay the German attack, it preserved the American defensive line and prevented a potentially catastrophic breakthrough. For his actions on January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration awarded by the United States. By the end of the war, he had become the most decorated American combat soldier of the Second World War, earning more than 30 military decorations from the United States, France, and Belgium. The battle near Holtzwihr became the defining moment of his military career and secured his place among the greatest soldiers in American history. After returning home, Murphy became a national hero and later appeared in several Hollywood films, most famously portraying himself in To Hell and Back. Despite his public success, the psychological scars of combat remained with him throughout his life. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy was killed in a plane crash near Catawba, Virginia, at the age of 45. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, where his grave remains one of the most visited in the cemetery. History remembers wars through maps, strategies, and casualty reports, but occasionally the course of a battle is changed by the decision of a single individual. On a frozen field outside the village of Holtzwihr, while tanks advanced through the snow and hundreds of enemy soldiers closed in, one young American refused to retreat. More than 80 years later, Audie Murphy's stand remains one of the greatest acts of individual battlefield heroism ever recorded, a reminder that extraordinary courage can alter the course of history even when the odds seem impossible.